After a couple of incredibly hectic days, I want to have a bit of a step back and have a look at PCVR and PSVR2, but today we're not focusing on how it's going to connect or speculating anymore. I'm kind of done with that because we're just waiting for more information at this point. I do want to talk about some of the games that I think will be great on PSVR2 when it has PC support in the future. And if you haven't touched PCVR ever, but are considering coming over when the PSVR2 gets support, because then you'll have a PCVR headset and a very, very good one at that, there's a couple of games that I think the OLED panels will really leverage, and say if the haptics work, could be really great, and just some overall games to get you started on PCVR to show you the best of the best experiences that you can get no matter the genre that you're into. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let me just throw the main one out there that everybody already knows. If you want to get the best out of PCVR and see one of still the best looking VR games ever made, you'll want to jump into Half-Life Alyx. While I personally think some games that have come out since have really introduced far more VR AF mechanics, Half-Life Alyx is just an absolutely jaw-dropping visual showcase and a realistic looking VR game with some of the best animation I've ever seen and some of the best mechanics in terms of making a VR game accessible to anybody who wants to try it. It's also got an incredibly engaging story that will take you many hours to complete, which I know is a big issue for some VR players as they want more fleshed out stories. If you haven't played Half-Life Alyx yet, it will look absolutely stunning on PSVR2, and you'll be able to experience that story with some of the best dynamic range you can get on a headset for £500-ish, which is nuts. Now, I'm only going to really speculate on this particular game when talking about PSVR2 features, because I'm not sure if this is even going to be a thing, and what I'm focusing on here is the fact that the haptics may or may not be used when bringing, the headset over to Steam VR. Some games could integrate, say, eye tracking or headset rumble really well, and if there's any game that's going to do that, it's going to be Valve's flagship PCVR title, Alyx. I just feel like some moments, especially in the beginning of the game when the Strider kind of climbs over you and past you, the headset rumble could be kicked off then, just like it is when the Stormbird flies past you and Call the Mountain. Moments like that could really be leveraged, and I think Half-Life Alyx will be such an incredible game to experience on this great piece of hardware if you haven't already. But everybody already knows about that, so let's get on to some slightly more niche games compared to that Valve powerhouse that you may not have heard of that you might be interested in. For all you shooter fans, if you love Pavlov, I have to recommend you Contractors. Not only is it an incredible base game experience, now with a Battle Royale mode that's its own separate game, so you will have to pick that up separately. It's got some of the most robust VR shooting mechanics I've ever used. It's really smooth feeling. The hit detection is on point, the gunplay feels great, and the best part about it are the mods. You can jump in and play Star Wars Battlefront in VR, you can play Halo in VR with all the maps, all the weapons, all the sounds that you know and love. It's all packaged in here and everything's super easy to download. There's an in-game mod manager basically that lets you install everything you need, and if you're joining a server that has mods, it will install them for you as you join the server, meaning that you don't have to faff about in the files or anything like that. If you don't want to, you can access mods so easily, and it's one of the best games to do so because of that ease of use. Contractors is amazing, and I recommend it to any VR FPS fan who hasn't tried it, and if you're leaping over to PC with the PSVR2, you have to try it. To scratch a similar itch, I would say Into the Radius is great for in-depth gun mechanics and realistic weapons handling, as well as a bit of spooky combat as you traverse through essentially a post-apocalyptic looking wasteland. I've loved my time with Into the Radius. It's quite a hard and punishing game, but in ways it's slightly beautiful. The sound design is really good. It genuinely gets you really heightened in terms of tension. The backpack system was so revolutionary for VR that so many other games have copied it for their betterment since, which is awesome. And if you're into Stalker, Metro, or Fallout, you'll feel right at home in this VR world. And it's one that I particularly really enjoy jumping into whenever I feel like I want a bit of tension in VR and I want a bit of hectic combat that isn't very large in scale, but is hectic because of each of the individual mechanics working together to make an engaging time during a firefight. However, you might want to wait until early access comes out for the sequel, Into the Radius 2. It seems to be polishing up literally everything about the original. Hopefully we'll get Into the Radius 2 on PSVR2 if you do want to wait for a native port, but if you don't and you happen to have a PC when PCVR support comes around for PSVR2, it's definitely worth looking at to pick up because it looks to be better than the original in every way, as well as adding co-op, which is just an awesome feature to have. So Into the Radius, definitely check it out. For all you flight simulator aficionados, I've got to recommend Flight Sim 2020. You've got to have some pretty beefy hardware to run this, and it does take up about 150 gig, but if you can run it, It is mind-blowing in VR how good Flight Simulator looks. One of the most realistic games I've ever played. The detail on the planes is just nuts. And I highly doubt that they'll get eye tracking working with PSVR2 in terms of being compatible with Flight Sim. That just isn't really going to happen, I don't think. But if it did, it could give lower end PCs a performance boost through the use of eye tracking. But again, Microsoft's VR division is not that big, and this game is pretty much abandoned now that the next one's coming out, I think, in terms of content and updates. So I don't see that happening. But still, through the OLED panels, I think Flight Sim will look absolutely incredible. And if you do have the storage space and a PC that can run it in VR, definitely give it a go, because it's in-depth, it's expansive, and it's breathtaking. But let's say that you've got lower-end hardware and you want to use the PSVR2 with a flight simulator, but you don't want something as big as Flight Sim 2020. And maybe you want something more combat-focused. Well, VTOL VR is right there for you. If you also want to make content in VR, this game is awesome because it has adjustable camera angles like Space Docker does on PSVR2. I've been waiting and hoping for a native port of VTOL VR to PSVR2, but I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. So for now, it is relegated to Steam VR, but when we do get PSVR2 support on PC, it's definitely one for maybe the more casual Flight Sim fans, or even the more in-depth ones to pick up. Just bear in mind that it's not as expansive in terms of how the planes function as, say, DCS World or Flight Sim 2020. It's a lot more accessible, which is a very good thing. It also has co-op support in some of the planes, so you can have a buddy sitting behind you operating parts of the plane while you do other sections like flying in the front. And overall, it is one of the highest rated VR games and simulations for a reason. It runs on most hardware that can run VR at all, and it is quite in depth if you want to sink the time into it. So VTOL VR, definitely check it out if you're leaping over to PCVR with the PSVR2. And finally, out of the games that we're going to talk about here, definitely try Blade and Sorcery. It's touted as the best melee combat game for a reason. It's incredibly in-depth with how the physics work, it feels real, it's got a vast weapon selection, multiple game modes you can try, and also tons of mod support. Now this is talking mod support in terms of you have to go into the files, take stuff out, put it into your files. It's a fairly simple process in terms of modding if you've ever done it before. Although if you haven't, you might want to follow some guides, say on YouTube, which guide you through the process, but it is simple enough, just more complex than Contractors that we talked about earlier. I have lost countless hours to fighting in Blade and Sorcery, going through levels, and just immersing myself in the best combat simulation that there is. Not to mention the Star Wars mod just unlocked a childhood want in me that's been in there for so long that finally got fulfilled, because it is absolutely perfect. And all the presentation of the maps, the weapons, the NPCs, the armor, everything is there. It's absolutely perfect. So try out Blade and Sorcery if you're a Star Wars fan, if you're a melee combat fan and just want to stick with the vanilla game. There's so many options here. And who knows if the haptics work with PSVR2, feeling those hits could be more real than ever. And even though the game isn't that demanding compared to other VR titles that are out there, it is one of the bigger games on Steam VR, so maybe it could get eye tracking support if that is a thing that comes over when the PSVR2 makes the leap to PCVR. So you could get a little performance boost if your PC is more mid-range and not on those higher echelons. And finally, I just want to put a shout out to all of the VR mods that are out there. These will look great on PSVR2 and a lot of them can run on lower to mid-end hardware. For example, the Half-Life 2 and Half-Life 1 VR ports are way better flat to VR ports than they have any right to be. There's ports for Jedi Outcast and Academy and countless others for you to check out, and it's a whole new market opened up. If you want to try those flat to VR mods with the PSVR2, it's something that you can never do before, so hopefully when it makes the leap over, we don't just have a limit to Steam VR, but we can just use the PSVR2 as a VR headset for all manner of PC things, including mods. So definitely take a look at the flat to VR mods that are out there. Some of them are absolutely mind-blowing, and to be honest, they're almost as good as if they were native. Now that wraps up my thoughts on the PCVR games that I'm going to be trying with PSVR2 when the compatibility makes its way over. There are definitely so many more out there that people absolutely love, and I get that. These are just my personal favorites that I'm going to be either revisiting or visiting for the first time with Sony's headset. Are there any that you're excited for? Any of you PCVR fans? Are there any games that you absolutely love on Steam VR or any other platforms on PC and you want other people to experience? Put them down in the comments below. Thank you all to our patrons, Luke Bentley, Phil Irving, Hazit Mirza, Ace Gamer, and Hippie Pickle. Your guys' donations help keep the channel running day after day and week after week, and I appreciate you all. If you want to join the Patreon, YouTube membership, or Discord, the links are below. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.